Session 4, Psyche as Committee. When I first started this work, and when I first started it, it looked nothing like this, of course. I was in my late 20s. I had come back from the world, or to the world, from having meditated for, 3 years in isolation. And I really thought I was just going to be a meditation teacher. I just thought that was it. I thought that was the bee's knees, man. I was like, there's this thing called meditation. It's going to rock your world. And no one's world was rocked at all. No one was interested. No one wanted to do it. And what I found is that, on the one hand, it's extremely laborious as a process. A lot of people don't have the time. But I think for those of us who don't stop there and keep digging into the psyche, into the psychosomatic and psychospiritual domains, we're really being invited to innovate onto technologies that can, reduce suffering from life. It's very, very clear. And, with my first few clients, I was definitely heavy on meditation. But one of the things I started to realize very quickly that helped so much more and that was welcomed so much more was this idea of revolution, transitions, right? And I'll explain what I mean. Meditation is a revolution in your entire way of being. And to some degree, you do have to have some experience. Just doing it without having an experience that it provides. I mean, it is an experiment, and it's supposed to actually produce a phenomenological, intrasubjective experience. And if you don't have those experiences, just sitting and breathing is, it's going to relax you to some degree, but it's just not going to have the real effect that we're looking for. And so if it does, that being said, it is a revolution, right? And that's what we want. That's to some degree what I think of as healing and growth and development. It's a revolution, right? It's from one regime to another. And one of the ways in that my practice originally took off was this idea that, there's a conditioned part of us that we grow up with, and that at some point in our development, we wake up to. We recognize that we're behaving in certain ways that we didn't necessarily choose. We have certain behavioral, emotional, even psychological patterns that we didn't necessarily choose, that they're chosen for us, and that we're simply kind of living out. And that's the conditioned self. And then there's this other part of us that's the authentic self. It's who we really are. And we can all feel that sometimes. We feel when we're being closed down a little bit and we're not able to, dance in the way that we want to, or speak in the way that we want to, or live in the way that we want to. And we have all these rationalizations. And, don't get me wrong, you can't just go out there into the world and be the weirdo that you are without a certain amount of collateral damage. You have to be strategic in the way that you present yourself, and you have to make sure that those around you are trustworthy, and that you've corralled a group of individuals who actually can benefit from your authentic self. But my point being is that where my practice went from just being about meditation was about psychosomatic revolution. So going from the conditioned self to the authentic self. And to take the previous module, one of the main elements of that was going from the head to the heart. That's another revolution. It's another transition, right? And it's a completely different existential address. The perspective that shifts when you're in your authentic self, or when you're in your heart as opposed to your head, is so radical that if you can just give someone an experience of that, they will want more of it. And that will be a huge amount of nitroglycerin that rockets them into more healing and development. And so all of that to be said, in this module, I'm going to talk to you about another revolution that is the same as all of those in some way. It's superimposed on top of them. It's just more nuanced. We're going to approach it from a more granular lens. So I'm going to share my screen. Knowing your defensive subpersonalities in detail, right? So as a refresher, right, every time you get dysregulated, a zombie suit of armor comes up. This is like the new term. I didn't think I would be using it so regularly at this point, but I guess we're rolling with it. So there is a defensive, maladaptive part of you that gets triggered into action. It is the zombie suit of armor. right? This is your defensive posture and response to trauma. And once again, if we get too traumatized, then whole parts of our lives get taken away by this, it gets co-opted by this zombie suit of armor. You can almost see it like the nothing in the never-ending story. I mean, that's what happens. There's a part of us that's like an empty shell of us, that is very irritable and knee-jerk responds to things and is not very clever and is very difficult to manage, right? Just starts taking over areas of our lives, right? And when you really get deeply into that, each one of these defensive personalities is what we would call a subpersonality, right? And there are some archetypal norms to subpersonalities that I'm going to take you through. Now, here's another layer of context that I kind of want to bring to the table. This is going to be a larger conversation, but I think, or at least I hope you'll appreciate it. So everything in life is actually a rendering of our psyche. I'm going to try to give you a few examples so that you can actually understand what I mean by that. I mean, everything in life is a rendering of our psyche, and especially our art. I've worked with incredible artists for years, very successful artists, and all of their art is a rendering of their psyche, literally an externalization of their internal psychic structures. And this is all the more true for myth and mythology, right? This is why mythology has lasted so long, how it has outlived empires. It's because it is so profoundly connected to us. We have preserved it, right? When, you know, edifices of granite and stone have turned to dust, our myths, our fairy tales have lasted the test of time. And the only reason for that, once again, is because they are literally reflections of our inner state. So I'll give you an example. You know, one of my favorite myths, mythological kind of networks is the Greek myths. I'm a huge lover of the Greek myths. And here you have, you know, a rendering of, I think it might have been Zeus or Kronos. I can't remember which one this exactly is because it's a little nondescript. But it's either the Titans or it might be the Olympians. And it's a rendering of your psyche. Let me be very clear about that. This is a rendering of your psyche. And what it's trying to show is that in some way, shape, or form, this is an example, at least back then, of what would be a kind of holistic, well-organized system. You have a dominant at the top. In this case, yes, it is masculine. We'll just put that to the side for a minute because it doesn't have to be. In my vision, it's actually hermaphroditic. That's why the training that I offer to practitioners is called the transdisciplinary training. Not only are we going beyond individual disciplines, we're not simply being a multidisciplinarian, we're being a transdisciplinary, which is to go beyond them, but also there's a reference to this idea of the true balancing and integration of the masculine and feminine polarities that I do think at a symbolic level is what is being expressed in the culture right now with, you know, all of the amplification of the movement of trans people. We actually see that actually is a rendering of psyche, right? I don't have any political opinions about it whatsoever. I see it simply as actually a positive eruption and externalization of what is happening at the psychic level. We are finally beginning to balance and integrate the masculine and feminine polarities within us, our animus and anima. And so here you have a rendering of subpersonalities controlled by a kind of a dominant monad, a dominant leader within it, right? And we have had artistic renderings of this forever. So here are the Olympians. So that maybe was the Titans. There you see Zeus. And the thing about the Olympians was, don't get me wrong, the Titans were a bunch of egotistical mayhem creators. And the Olympians created a revolution against the Titans, if you remember. Now, do not think of this as some kind of random fairy story. It's not. This is showing the development of psyche. We all show up in the world with a bunch of warring internal factions within us, and we wake up to it when we wake up to it. Sometimes we wake up in our 20s, sometimes in our 30s, sometimes in our 40s. It doesn't really matter, but at some point you will experience a titanomachy. That is the battle between the Olympians and the Titans. And what it really is it's just a revolution from a more disassociated, internal, warring factional system to a more holistic generative one. That's it. That's all this is showing us, is that over the course of our lifetimes, we should be upgrading our system. We should be doing a defrag on our psyche, right? And for some reason, we still don't offer this to children, and I'm hoping we can change that at some point. Here, of course, is the School of Athens, another great one. It's just once again a rendering of psyche. Of course, you have Plato and Aristotle in the middle. You do have Hypatia right there. She's one of the great philosopher women who had to be disguised. But this again is literally a rendering of psyche. This is your internal world. Do not think about this. Do not think of this as the academy or anything like that. This is your psyche. And this, to some degree, is an example of what a good psyche looks like, right? People are discussing. You do have leaders at the front. Okay, fine, it's two men this time. But, once again, look, it was a patriarchal regime at that time, so it's just the way it is. But the point is that there is a dominant leader, okay? Here you actually have two dominant leaders. And I actually like that because you can see, I think it was Plato always pointing to the sky and Aristotle to the ground. They were taking these two different perspectives. We won't get into that piece. Anyway, an upgrade from that was the Arthurian legends, Arthur's Round Table, right? This was a massive upgrade because boom, now you have Arthur and you have Guinevere. Okay, so now you actually do have a rendering of the masculine and feminine in the psyche. They are balanced, they are shoulder to shoulder, and all of the subpersonalities underneath them are in alignment. And most importantly, they've all been conscripted to one end, right? The attainment of the grail. This is, in my cursory research of archetypal symbols for the generative committee of the psyche, this is the first one that I have seen in modern history that has been wonderfully generative. Now, don't get me wrong, there were still issues. I mean, Guinevere fell in love with Lancelot. There were other things that happened. Much better than the Olympians. The Olympians were a total mess, but at least they held it together, right? I mean, the Titans were children eaters. Okay, so Kronos ate children, Uranus ate children. Zeus didn't eat children. He cheated on his wife, but he didn't eat children. That's an upgrade. In the Knights of the Round Table, it was another upgrade. Okay, maybe there was a little bit of infidelity. We have to be very compassionate with the development of psyche, right? No one's perfect. Let he or she who casts the first stone be unblemished themselves, as the saying somewhat butchered goes. Here's another great example, just to throw it in. The Last Supper. This is another rendering of psyche, subpersonalities, and a dominant monad in the center, a dominant archetypal leader in the center. The Lord of the Rings. This actually was another very generative rendering of psyche. And in the beginning, you had a king who had not really accepted his crown, but who, through the course of working against the powers of evil and within the fellowship, attained to his sovereignty, right? There are other examples. I mean, that is a psyche, that is a well-functioning psyche. All of the Star Trek films, and here what you have, what's Worf, right? Mars. This is the fighter within us, right? And we must have that fighter within us. It's unbelievably dangerous. He must be dangerous, the fighter within you. You don't want to have a castrated fighter within you, but they need to be under control. And that's what Worf was. He was Mars under control. It was wonderful. You had the empath. I mean, you had all different types. You had the intellect as Data. That would be the mind, right? You had the child with Wesley. I mean, it was wonderful. And even the Avengers of today, right? This is another rendering of psyche against, the powers of evil. And once again, there was civil war within the wonderful franchise of the Avengers. And I would go into this even in more detail because it was very psychologically coherent. I have just enormous respect for the writers and creators of this particular movie series because they really understood what it was to create an archetypal story. And anyone who thinks it was just a kind of fancy cartoon really didn't appreciate the deeper meaning to it. Here's one of my favorites. I actually did a presentation on this at some point. This is Veronese's Wedding at Cana. And you can see in the middle, you have the Christ staring out at the viewer, right? And this very much is another rendering of psyche, right? And Veronese was actually held to trial by the church leaders because they believed that this was an immoral and improper artistic creation because he had put, the anointed one alongside, philanderers and drunkards and dwarfs and other individuals. And Veronese got out of that with some pretty clever speaking, because of course the religious figures at the time were just a bunch of old farts. But the point is that this is your psyche. It's perfect. It's beautiful. In this particular one, Christ looking out at you is your awareness. That's your access point to spirit. And all of these other elements, these are the voices, these are the warring factions within you. And it often starts off like this. It's a horde. And so part of the revolution that we're going to be talking about today is identifying exactly what subpersonalities are running rampant within your psyche and how each one of them points to their own redemption, right? So your own revolution, you don't have to kind of remake the wheel and come up with it. The ways in which you are internally dysfunctional point to their automatic redemption. It points to the revolution that's required. It's like it goes in hand in glove. So there comes a moment in all of our lives, misspelled, where we're invited to overthrow the existing conditioned pathological regime and build a more wholesome kingdom within and without. And that's eventually where I go. Obviously, it has to start within, because anything that is unresolved within, we will keep calling it back into our lives and call it fate, as Jung said. So we have to address it within. Like, just understand that you're never going to fix your life from the outside in. It's not going to work. It's from the inside out. And anything, once again, that you do not address from the inside, it will just keep tripping you up. And you see this. I mean, look, Steve Jobs, when he got kicked out of Apple, that was an example of the inside having not been fully attuned to itself, so that when all of the images and symbols and whispers came along that perhaps he was going to be ousted, he wasn't able to really see them, because the same blind spot without is going to be reflected from that which is within. So here's just a picture of the Titanomachy. It's the great first revolution. There's the baby eater of Uranus. And of course, here is Zeus castrating his father. And the symbolism there is very simple, saying that your way of being is no longer going to be reproduced. That's what a revolution is. That's what it is within ourselves. We are saying to ourselves, there are certain pathological impulses and patterns within you that we are now not going to allow to be reproduced. So we are going to castrate that maladaptive pattern so that it will interrupt and a new, more generative one can be built. So how does that play out? Well, we go back to the psyche. Here's my initial very basic draft. Now remember, right? Your paternal ancestry, your maternal ancestry, your grandmother, your grandfather, culture, your mother, your father, all the stuff that they bring to you epigenetically, and everything that you hear and experience from your father and mother, from your inception, probably, but certainly from the moment you are born. And I would say certainly for at least 6 months in the womb, because you're absorbing everything. I always say every single thing you experience from your family is like a line of code that's just written, every single thing. And you introject all that stuff and it becomes part of your software. All of that makes up your conditioned self, right? None of this stuff you choose. It's given to you. It's embossed into you. It's engraved into you. It's carved into your psyche. That's your conditioned self. What comes in from the soul, what comes in, who we really are underneath, that's the authentic self. Okay? It's like a liquid going into a cup. And we want to not mistake the fact that the liquid takes on the shape of the cup, but the liquid is not the cup. Nature and nurture. The new order, the old regime. And the new order is suppressed for a period of time. And so that's why I say there's always a moment when you wake up and you recognize, this is not who I am. This is not the life I meant to live. We all must go through a rite of passage. And the first rite of passage, you could almost say, is oftentimes the Saturn return. It's around 28, 27, 28, 29. I mean, I've worked, the majority of the people I've worked with who are, you know, under 40 have been going through their Saturn return. I have a tremendous respect and love for the Saturn return, and I know very much how to work it. It's a revolution. That's what it is. It's the new order. You could call it the old order that was repressed for a period of time is finally breaking through the concrete. And so this is a straight up battle between your most maladaptive subpersonalities and your authentic self, aka the best you. What are subpersonalities? Let's just get really into detail now. All right. So we're back in the psyche now. Okay, that's your psyche. These are some traumas. Here's your energetic heart. Okay, here's the awareness. We want the awareness on the energetic heart because that's going to radiate outwards and help everything. All of this is kind of in the body, right? Within the body, of course, is also the mind. And alongside the body and the mind are also the emotions, right? That's like a very general schematic of you, right? Awareness, energetic heart, body, mind, emotions. Most people, however, are not that well balanced. It doesn't look like that. It actually kind of looks like this, like you're a big old mind. Okay, a lot of engineers out there, a lot of Google people, a lot of corporate people. All due respect to you people, you're kind of a mind on a stick. Some of you other empaths out there, you're just a big ball of emotion, right? You just like, and we find each other. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's where polarity works in relationship. At some point, we may have a module on that. I might kind of slip one in around relationship. You know, if you're very heady, you're going to find someone who's emotional. And that's appropriate because your genetic code wants to spread its breadth and depth, or else, you're not going to survive in the world as well. As if someone who was very mindy married someone else who was very mindy. That's kind of it's almost like the aristocracy. You're going to have too much inbreeding there. It's going to lower your genetic variability. So yes, either you're a big mindy person, you're an emotional person. Sometimes, a lot of people I think are very intellectual, but they do have access to their emotions. But a lot of people are actually just unconscious, right? About really about all this stuff. But here's the interesting piece, right? Is that yes, your mind, the voices in your head, right? That's the simplest way to describe the mind. It's your imagination, it's the voices in your head, it's your ability to have abstract thought, right? The emotions, they're usually the energies that are swirling in your torso, although they can move to the distal limbs and the head, but it's pretty much you've got mind up here, thoughts in your head, abstract thought, emotions in the torso. Those are energies. When you put those together, especially with regards to trauma, you get subpersonality. A subpersonality is literally it's a kind of autonomous being within you. It's an autonomous psychic self within you. It has its own thoughts. It has its own limiting beliefs. It has its own emotional patterns. It has its own triggers. It has its own rationalizations. It has the memory of the trauma. It's like a little being within you. So here are the subpersonalities, and we have many of them. And then, of course, there's usually one at the top, right? And that's the funny part. Like, are your subpersonalities governed by Uranus? Are you a baby eater, right? And by baby eater, I mean, are you a father or a mother who vampirically sucks the energy of your children? Are you constantly critical of your children? Do you tell them to shut up? Do you neglect them? Okay, I'm sorry, you might be a Titan. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are Titans, and by which I mean a primitive human being. You might be a little bit better. You might be an Olympian. So an Olympian is not as destructive as a Titan, but they're kind of cheaters, they're liars, they're philanderers, they're cuckolds. Zeus was a cuckold, man. I mean, he cheated on Hera his whole life. You know what I mean? That's all he did. You could be Arthur. Okay, Arthur would be better. Arthur would be better. You've got some issues in your relationship, but it doesn't matter. You work it out. You work it out, and you still have a great woman, and she stays by your side. She stays by your side and you stay by hers. This is like Bill Clinton and Hillary, right? They're Arthur and Guinevere, except that Bill in this case is Guinevere, I guess. And or maybe he's Lancelot and Monica Lewinsky is Guinevere. Yeah, I guess maybe that would be it. Or maybe Bill was Guinevere and Monica Lewinsky was Lancelot. Anyway, you get what I'm saying with that. My point is that there's another developmental stage of psychic rendering in art that actually is a trend in life, right? So are you a Titan? Are you an Olympian? Are you an Arthurian? Mary? Are you Mary? Are you just the divine feminine? Are you Medusa? That's another one. We're going to talk a lot about Medusa later. Medusa is one of the best. Healthy archetypes and unhealthy subpersonalities. Okay, aka internal parts, aspects, multiple personalities. I do like that. The IFS people, internal family systems people, I think it's Richard Schwartz. He starts a lot of presentations saying we all have multiple personality disorder. I like that. I think he's right. I think that was a great thing to bring to the table. Absolutely. Thank you for normalizing that, Richard. And so subpersonalities specifically are who we become when our traumas are triggered and we become disintegrated. And once again, bear in mind that some of these subpersonalities actually take over our whole life, right? So the zombie suit of armor can actually run your whole life and you can forget who you are. And I think there are a lot of wives out there who know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to be clever or glib. I'm being entirely serious. This is definitely, and it's not just a stereotype, this is definitely more a male problem than a female problem. I would say it's 80-20, but those females who are experiencing it, and also this has nothing to do with gender. I would just say, we could say masculine dominated individuals or feminine dominated individuals. The more masculine dominated individuals definitely, I think, struggle more with subpersonalities than the more feminine ones. And so the masculine, you can be a woman or you can be a man or you can be something else. But if you index more fully towards the masculine, you may be open to more subpersonality contamination and possession in your life. So healthy male archetypes: boom, king, wise man, warrior, lover. Here are just like the main four. Unhealthy versions of the king: the tyrant or the weakling. Yeah, man. So identify that when you are holding power or when you are trying to hold power in your life, in your family, with your partner, with your children, are you a king or are you a little prison bitch? Are you a tyrant? Are you a weakling? Are you a pushover? You have to identify it, right? If you're a man and whenever you try to hold power, your voice, your energy kind of rises into your throat and you start kind of whining at stuff. Yeah, you've got a wound around being heard. You've got a wound around being a king, around just saying, no, I'm not going to do that, and we're not going to do that. And I'm happy to talk through it with you. But the answer is no, at least for now. And let's talk it through. Or you're a tyrant. You just push everyone around. It's pretty obvious. In the warrior, are you when you fight, are you a sadist or are you a masochist? This is classic. The weakling is often a masochist, actually, and the tyrant is often a sadist. We're not going to spend too long on this. The idea is, if in doubt, ask someone who knows you well. Just show them this map and just be like, hey, when I'm governing my life and I'm governing our family in some way, and don't get me wrong, I'm a firm believer in the flux between the partnership. A partnership should be a flux. That's the trans way, actually, is that sometimes the king is right and sometimes the queen is right. And a really, really good king is always consulting with his queen, period. And so ask your partner, where do I index? Tyrant, weakling, sadist, masochist. They'll tell you. They know. And if you don't know it, just watch the pattern. The wise man. This is really important. A lot of people with latent wisdom index into the fool, or you index into the manipulator. Both are terribly destructive. Don't do that. The lover. This is another big one, actually, for men. A lot of men, and especially in the midpoint of a marriage, and I've worked a lot in that area, it's really important to maintain your loving relationship with your partner. It doesn't have to be, like consistently, incessantly, erotically sexual, but it does need to be tactile. Okay, it does need to be close. I think as we get older, I think it's normal that all of those drives actually kind of take a second seat to the heart and to the energy of love. There's an energy of love that is far finer, like silk, like gold, like fine wine, like champagne. That's different from the sexual encounter. And if we're not on that conveyor belt that's getting us to that kind of coruscating, loving energy that is not so interested in the explosion of sexuality, we can develop the relationship further. But what most couples that I have seen who are not, in the personal development world and not in the tantra world do is that, they have a great relationship for 10 to 15 years, and then their erotic chemistry takes a nosedive and falls off a cliff. And then a gulf develops between them. And so you want to understand, is that you? And does that mean, does the man go off and go to porn, and does the woman simply shut down? I don't know. But the point is to identify where you're at the very beginning at least, and see where you can care for that part of you, right? Same thing, bring in the energetic heart, having the conversations with your partner. There's more to say about it, but I'm just going to go through this one. All right, healthy female archetypes: queen, wise woman, mother, lover. These are just rough, man, when you first see these, right? The queen, are you a tyrant? Are you a weakling? The lover, for the woman, seductive or frigid. I mean, that's just rough. But I mean, you have to identify it. Like, that's a classic for a lot of women, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? It's where we all go in one form or another, right? The idea is, once again, just to acknowledge it, have a lot of compassion, and once again, every single subpersonality, and probably going to get to this a little more, is you have to see them. These are parts of you that are within you. You have to see them as little people, and they need to be spoken to. And the only way that we can actually heal them is to attune to them, because each of them, once again, was developed as a result of a trauma or a neglect, which is a trauma. It's maybe a less acknowledged one. But the woman who is seductive, that often does come from being objectified and from, sexual trauma, incest, things like that. Being conditioned into believing that a huge amount of their power or their value is in the seductive realm, right? That would often be a conditioned piece, and part of the redemption of that is to kind of bring that energy back into the heart and rediscover the intrinsic value of the woman outside of that domain. On the other hand, the frigid woman will have had a different set of traumas, perhaps the same traumas and just having a different response to it, actually. And so the corrective or the healing posture for that is, once again, to go to the heart. And it's a conversation. And some of this stuff, of course, don't get me wrong, you can't do with your partner. It's too intense. And perhaps there is also too much history with the partner. So I will say that some of the deeper elements of this do have to be worked through with practitioners. And once again, if anyone needs any referrals, happy to give them. If you're working with a practitioner, one thing I would say is really look once again at that secure container. Is the practitioner on time? Are they going over? Are they working with someone you know? All of those things will contaminate a practice. So just be aware. I'm very much against actually families working with the same therapist, although I hear it a lot. I think that you're not going to get half as much healing as you think as you might if you're working with an individual therapist who's not working with other people especially your family and even your friends. That, although, is for the transdisciplinary healer training. Anyway, the mother, possessive or distant. I mean, that's a classic. Oh my God. I mean, the devouring mother is a huge contingent, I think, of every therapeutic practice. Mothers who devour their children, who become fused with their children. And I think it's really important for mothers to understand that. One of the books that speaks directly to that is The Runaway Bunny. Go online, look at the children's book, The Runaway Bunny. It's a horrendous book. This would be an example of one of those stories that is completely debased, and not only outside of coherent archetypal psychological norms, but actually kind of lionizing and celebrating a pathological deviation from those norms. In The Runaway Bunny, the young bunny boy is trying to individuate. He's trying to have autonomy in his life and saying, I want to go off and do this. I want to go off and do this. And every single time he says, I want to go off and I want to be a sailor, the mother says, I will become a storm and I'll blow you back to me. And incidentally, there are some kind of elements, seductive elements and plays on words that I think are even more destructive and toxic than the book otherwise would be. And if you read them, you'll see it right there. But the mother essentially, every time the boy bunny goes off, the mother calls him back home. So it's a castration. The runaway bunny is a story of a mother castrating her son, right? By contrast, Peter Rabbit is an archetypally coherent story, right? Because Peter goes off and faces the dragon, right? Mr. McGregor, who killed his father, right? Now, don't get me wrong, when he comes home after doing the adventure, he doesn't get warm milk and chamomile tea like Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. But it's not the tale of Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, is it? The story that we remember is Peter Rabbit. He's the hero, believe it or not. He does misbehave. He does not listen to his mother, but he goes on a hero's journey and he survives and he comes back. And that's why we remember him, because it's about Peter Rabbit. He's the hero. So he's the antidote to the runaway bunny. I love those stories. See, was there something else about Mr. McGregor? Well, the mother was good to Peter. She didn't give him the warm milk, but she tucked him in and she was kind to him. And that's what a good mother should do. Celebrate, even though it's going to break her heart, the individuation process of the child. Allow the tether to be broken, allow that umbilical cord to be broken. A lot of mothers have difficulty with that. It's okay. I can't imagine. I'm not a mother in this lifetime, so I can only have compassion for that unfathomably close connection that a mother has with a child. I only know it from the other side. So, wise woman, witch, fool, you get the point, right? And so every time we are dissociated, every time we are triggered into a defensive posture, one way or another, you can find and discover the subpersonality that you are being possessed by, right? And the ones that I've offered here are a good kind of opening gambit for what they might look like in certain domains. I'm covering probably 70%, 80% of what's out there. And the most important thing is that you get it. With all of our subpersonalities, they are primitive personalities. And so they work at a primitive level, which is all about infighting, power struggles, and Machiavellianism, right? And ultimately, all of that does create autoimmunity. And take it from me, having worked in the chronic illness world for many years, that is really true. And there isn't a single chronic illness patient that I have encountered that hasn't been possessed for large swaths of their life by a subpersonality. And it's been a complete revelation for them to realize that, and to realize that there's actually a more authentic them that has been beaten into submission, beaten into disassociation. Part of the therapeutic process, hold that healthy, safe container, and to show them every time it comes up, to say, there's the subpersonality. How many individuals who I've seen have wisdom, they have such deep wisdom within them. You can almost tell it because they'll come up with an idea and then immediately be like, oh yeah, but that's bullshit. That's probably stupid. I have seen that so many times. You watch it with people all the time. It's like, well, what if we did this? No, that's probably stupid. It's almost like you watch it as the authentic self emerging and the subpersonality coming in and smacking it down. That is an introject from a pathological parent, period. Right? You see someone come up with an idea or want to do something, and then they immediately put themselves down afterwards. They have introjected what a parent did to them, period. That's just straight up conditioning. I'll give you a million examples of that. Even something like refusing compliments. That's another one. When you say to someone like, oh, hey, you look really beautiful today. And they're like, no, I'm fine. They're pushing it back. They're refusing the turning of what I call healthy energy. And this is what I talk about with all families. I'm always saying, when you're in a family, like, you need to be turning healthy energy with the family. It's a love field, and you need to be turning the love. And of course, periodically things will come in and it'll interrupt the love, and then you'll have to work it through. But how many people have I seen over the years? It's like, once again, this shocking revelation to me that families are not turning any love. There's like no love turning, like they don't know how to do it. I've said to someone the other day, and I thought it was kind of a good analogy. It came up with it was, you're not in one boat together with your family. You're all rowing together. But what's actually happening is that, the three kids are in their own boat, mom's in her own boat, dad's in his own boat. And everyone's tied by a rope, and, dad's pulling them and the kids are pulling, and then mom's behind just getting pulled by everyone else. That was the particular configuration. It doesn't matter. There can be many different configurations. And what I said was, we actually need to get you all in the same boat. That's what I'm teaching you. I'm teaching you how to actually get in the same boat, but you can't get in the same boat together because you don't know how to stop fighting, and you don't know how to turn love. And ultimately, when you start to stop fighting and you start to turn that love, then you're going to get in a boat and you're going to stop rowing, which is what you're all doing. You're just rowing. Once you start to turn that love, once you start to get in touch with the energetic heart as a navigator of your life, then you're going to mount a sail, and then the wind is going to start taking you. And that's completely different from rowing your way through life. Dear Lord. So I really like that. I share that metaphor because I just thought it was unbelievably accurate, right? If you're connected to the field and you're really working to activate that heart energy, it's going to guide you. It's going to open and say, go here, go over there. And where you have little speed bumps and little dysregulatory moments of subpersonalities emerging, that's a trauma. Stop everything. Pre-production. Let's figure out who needs what. Let's set it up so the next time it happens, we open the doorway and go through the doorway and try to heal that space and listen to the inner child, listen to the heart that says, what's the antidotal energy? And then how are we going to face it on the outside? When you start doing that, you are literally being carried by the wind of spirit, the wind of the Tao. And it's a much better ride. It's much more efficient. It's much more fun. And it's much more profitable. Okay. I'll throw that in too. Yes, you make more money. Yes. Don't think you don't. My God. All right. This is the inner hero's journey. Energetic heart there. The energetic heart is going to transition, the weakling into the warrior. Yes. How many individuals have I supported in my practice like that? People who just have been beaten down by their parents, I tell you, who've really been traumatized, and you have to just support them to be the warrior. You can do it. Get up, go, march. It's wonderful when that happens because we all want to be the warrior when you really get down to it. We all do. Every unhealthy subpersonality was created by a trauma or misguided parenting. Our job is to identify our defensive subpersonalities and transition them into healthy archetypes. Yes. And so every subpersonality, you see what I put here is I put the root underneath. Every subpersonality that comes out, once again, is a variation on the zombie suit of armor, right? So all I'm doing is I'm double clicking onto the zombie suit of armor and showing you that subpersonalities will emerge underneath that. That's what this module is all about. We're double clicking on the zombie suit of armor, on the defensive posture, the defensive state from the trauma, and we're seeing that these are the variations on it. And underneath them, you will find an experience. You will find a trauma. You will find an experience. You will find a limiting belief, and you will find something the child didn't get. And once again, you have to give them what they need on the inside energetically, and then listen to hear what do they need on the outside strategically. It's a two-step process. Okay, so trauma, dad, culture, mom. Here's just another angle of the defense and the exile, the dragon and the child. When you're working with the child, these are just some more, kind of rough drafts I'm kind of offering you. The child often needs to hear, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, in order to give you the treasure that is the Arkenstone there. I'm sorry I had to leave you. The inner child often needs to hear that from us because regardless of what has happened, we have left them. They have left us. They have been sheared off of us and dumped into the unconscious. So to actually apologize to the inner child, like, I'm sorry, to the energetic heart, oh my God, that is actually huge, to be like, I'm sorry. Sorry I haven't been listening to you all this time. I'm sorry I was never taught. Or I'm sorry I have had inklings and I haven't taken those leads and followed them through with you. And, with the defensive subpersonality, we can also apologize to them. That also can be part of it. In the end, the defensive subpersonalities, they're not that easy to negotiate with. So I don't prioritize negotiating with the subpersonality. I mean, the way to really work with the subpersonality is to soothe it with the energetic heart to sleep. You kind of want to make it go dormant a little bit. And then what you want to do is you want to develop your new strategy for how you're going to behave the next time a trigger comes along that would activate them. And once you strategize how you want to behave, you want to show them, listen, I'm going to take the wheels of this car in this particular area of life where historically you have been activated. So Medusa previously you have been activated in this particular domain, Zeus, Chronos, there's a better way of doing it. And I'm going to develop that. I'm going to come up with a new way. Instead of being the sadist, we're going to be the king. Instead of being the coward, we're going to be the warrior. And I'm going to make sure that I choose the right moment, and I'll feel it in my heart when it's the right moment. And if I can get through it, that's going to show the dragon, the defense, the subpersonality, that you are now taking the reins and it can let go of them. That's a process. But what I mean by that is that you really have to show the subpersonality that you don't need it anymore, because you are engaging with a new set of more generative, heroic, courageous behaviors. Once you have done that, the subpersonality recedes, right? There's no talking the subpersonality down. Once again, you can bring energy with the energetic heart and it will slowly, but like to negotiate with a subpersonality, it kind of goes on forever. I'm not a big believer in that. I mean, you can do a little bit of it, sure, but it's like, just do the work. You do the work, they will recede, period. Communicating with subpersonalities, I kind of feel like this was important to put in. First of all, identify what your subpersonality is doing, right? And name them. Give them a name. All the people I've worked with, we identify these individuals within us, these parts within us. You have to name them. If you don't name them, as Dan Siegel would say, you can't tame them. Although he's talking about other things, but I think it's great. Name it to tame it, right? Discover why it does what it's doing and what problem it originally solved, right? So that is important in terms of redeeming the existence of the subpersonality, the defensive posture. It was triggered by something, like you were traumatized, and this part of you came out and it in some way has helped you. You should understand that. You need to understand what problem, at least in principle, the subpersonality solved. Understand that piece. You don't understand that piece, you're not going to be able to truly integrate and heal. Thank it for solving that problem and never stop doing so. Let them know that you're grateful, but that it's time for an upgrade, to upgrade this primitive reaction to a more sophisticated response, and then ask what it needs to trust you again. Once again, I usually find that the heart will tell you. You're not going to, that was maybe not accurately written there, because you're not asking the subpersonality to tell you what it needs to trust you again. You're asking the inner child, and you're following the impulses of the energetic heart. The wisdom is going to come from the energetic heart if you stay with it, not the subpersonality. The subpersonality doesn't know anything. That's the zombie suit of armor. So listen to what the inner child, right, or the heart needs to prepare the ground before a trigger, during and after. This is the pre-production piece. Connect it to an archetype that it can believe in. That's valuable. So once again, you're shepherding an orderly transition of power from cowardice to heroism. From, let's go back to them. What else do we have? That's like from impotence to strength, from masochism to being a good warrior, from a weakling to a king, right? From a distant mother to a generative, caring mother, from a fool to a wise woman, from a tyrant to a queen, right? So each negative, maladaptive subpersonality, it just kind of naturally points to its heroic counter polar opposite, right? And so you don't have to remake the wheel. Each one of them just kind of sows the seeds of its own demise by giving birth to its corrective. And that's what you want to do, shepherd an orderly transition of power. And the more you map this, the more you track it. This is where I say to people all the time now, I'm like, please be a professional in your family. Be a professional in your psyche. The amount of people who want to heal, they want to heal their family, they want to do all these things, but they don't really want to be a pro about it. They don't want to study. They don't want to make notes. They don't want to understand themselves. They just want to go to a magician who does a session on them and everything is magically restored. It's like wrong. Don't do that. It's never going to work. I actually, for a short period of time at the very, very early stages of my career, I was working a little bit like that. It's like the practitioner doing the work for you. It's like, no. You're going to become a pro in your psyche. You're going to become a pro in the psyche of your children. You're going to know all this stuff. And the minute you start to know it, it's so much easier to work it through. So it's really all about empowering yourself with, at least at the very beginning, the wisdom, the understanding of what the hell is going on. And if you follow everything that I've been saying, it's all laid out here for you. Track it, who's becoming whom, when, as a result of what rationalizations do they have that they're not, what are their triggers, what archetype is the subpersonality, what's it pointing to in terms of its resolution. I mean, you get the point, right? Once you've got the intellectual piece, then heart, you got to stick it with the heart. That's the somatic piece, right? And then the hero's journey outside, solving it outside. Let me make sure I got everything. Oh yeah, notwithstanding moments of relief, you will not experience an authentic transformation of a subpersonality until after you have successfully succeeded in an external healing hero's journey. I've said that over and over again. It's true. So you got to do the whole process: intellectual, somatic, hero's journey on the outside. They will not trust you until you've shown them that you can actually do this in a real life situation. Kind of simple. A few examples: speaking and standing up for yourself in a situation where you have previously cowered and where you would have previously cowered, and then you succeed. That would be an example of the hero's journey. Holding a boundary where would have previously let someone walk all over you or been excessively accommodating. Leaving a situation that you would have previously felt you had to stay in, right? Using your own 2 feet, get up, get the fuck out of there. I've said to people many times, do not sit. If you're in a situation where someone's abusing you, like a parent or a family member, and the best you'd come up with is like not responding to them, it's like wrong, leave. And don't be rude, don't slam the door. Just let everyone know. Like this was a big one for, like, let's say you have a parent who every time you get on the phone with them, they start dumping on you, right? And you don't know what to do. You've gone quiet. You've tried to tell them to stop. It's like, don't do that. None of that stuff works. Work on the unconscious level. If you have a parent who you want to stay in touch with, but every time you pull them up, they start dumping on you or guilt tripping you or doing whatever, just start saying to them out of the blue, oh, hey, I got to run. I got another call, but I'll speak to you later. Lots of love. Bye. If you do that 2 or 3 or 4 times, when they start pulling their shit, their unconscious will understand that you're not taking it anymore. And it's a very subtle way of doing it. It doesn't matter that you don't have a call waiting. It doesn't matter that you don't have anything to do. Literally telling the unconscious, I'm not standing for this, and you're doing it in a covert way. And you have to do it in a covert way because they have set up the rules of that game by not being able to discuss it openly with you and not being able to have an overt conversation about it. Many people are like this. If people can't actually have an open conversation with you, then you withdraw yourself. And you withdraw yourself every time they start pulling that shit. And what that does is, at the unconscious level, it tells them, if you do this, I will withdraw. And what you often find is that they slowly stop doing it. Holding someone accountable when you previously might have stayed silent. That's a huge one. And so all of these, right, with the help of the energetic heart, can begin to create what I sometimes refer to as a psychic permaculture system. And here it is. It's a big, ugly map that I've created for you guys. We've got the traumas at the bottom. They've created the subpersonalities. The energetic heart helps us move towards the healthy archetypes, all of which can be in alignment with our mission. And yes, how this affects your mission, because I'll show you. Because bear in mind, you have your mission up here. If you've got a judge and a dad and a child and a warrior here, and they're all different subpersonalities, you realize your subpersonalities, where are they aiming? They're aiming to the repetition of the wound. They're just waiting around for triggers. They're all about the blood feud. Your subpersonalities are not aimed towards your mission. They're like little thrusters on the rocket of your mission, veering you off course. And they are filled with all that unmetabolized emotion that you are not metabolizing, you're not processing, right? So the fire of emotion, the fire of unmetabolized pain is driving your subpersonalities into repetition of trauma. So you add all of those together, man, and it is a recipe for not attaining your mission, or doing so while repeating many, many traumas along the way, which I see all the time. This is a very masculine thing. It's like, we're gonna do the thing, we're gonna attain the goal, and we don't care how many dead bodies we're gonna have to walk over to get it. And it's just horrendous. It's appalling. And one of the bodies, of course, is them, like those inner children that you're still neglecting at the expense of attaining this mission and thinking that it's all going to go better because of it. It won't. You will still roll in all of that trauma into the completion of that mission and to the celebration and to the next hero's journey. So there's a great scene I'm going to show. I'm going to show this scene. I don't even know if this is legal. I think it's legal. I think there's a term for it, but I want to show you guys the greatest scene in modern cinema that I've found that directly illustrates what it looks like when your healthy archetypes confront and overcome your destructive, maladaptive subpersonalities. It's the most exquisite rendering of psyche, and we're just going to play it. It is from the Lord of the Rings, and it's when Gandalf and the other members of the Fellowship arrive at the king.
Cannot allow you before Theoden king so armed, and upgrade him by order of Grima Wormtongue.
Boom! I gotta pause it. So it's King Theoden, right? And he says, "I cannot allow you into the hall armed by order of Grima Wormtongue." Grima Wormtongue is the subpersonality that has possessed the king. And once again, you know people in your life who have literally been possessed by subpersonalities. You know that crazy racist uncle we all have? Yeah, him. That's not him. That's his trauma. That's his zombie suit of armor. That's his Grima Wormtongue. Grima Wormtongue is ruling the kingdom of his life. And here is the healing archetype. The cunning, the cunning of the wizard, of the wise man. And here we see the possession in full glory. I want to be so clear. This is inside of us all. You are not looking at actors. You're not looking at a story of fantasy. You are looking at your own psyche. There are parts of you in certain moments where you are a withered old king, a withered old queen, and there is a Grima Wormtongue, zombie suit of armor that has taken you over.
Oh, is somebody? Could I welcome you? And out on crow. Just the hour in which this conjurer chooses to appear. That spell I name ill news. Yes. Be silent. Keep your poor tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through hardened and belly crooked words with a witless word.
This is the process we go through. We confront our dysregulated states. It's a battle. This is you when you're upset, when you're triggered. And this is your first attempt to try to re-regulate yourself. Your tread is too strong. Your first attempt after Zachary's course will fail. Get out the grid. But you must come back.
Silence poison is
That is the energetic part right there. You must confront the subpersonality or dysregulated state with the energetic heart.
Don't kill me.
And you must have faith that you will not die. That personality is strong. The perfect balancing of the masculine and feminine in the process of healing. The masculine is fearless against the complex. Feminine, eternally caring. All right. Okay. There it is. Okay. Ah, just brilliant. But that's what it feels like. I'm glad I showed that because really just bear in mind that is the battle with your dysregulated states, and you must have courage because it's a spell. Our dysregulated states are subpersonalities. It's a trance that we are in, a hypnotic trance. And it is only the love and compassion and energetic power of the heart that will get through it. Don't try to think your way through, man. You can't do it. You won't do it. If you try to outthink a complex, you'll never get there. What disarms a complex is your care, your compassion, and also your expertise. Gandalf is not a witless conjurer. He is a tried and true studied wizard. He knows spells. And you need to know the spell of the complex. You need to understand those concentric circles, that first emotion is hiding another one. You need to understand the manager and the rationalizations. And more than anything, you need to actually do the experience of feeling your energetic heart so you can check into the field so that when someone is dysregulated, who you love, who's in your family, whether a child or a partner, you can feel into that wound that is trying to emerge and be cared for in the grail of the feminine healing container. If you can do that, you can break the possession. So the homework is identify which subpersonality you become when dysregulated, which healthy archetype is actually trying to emerge, design a circuit breaker to interrupt the program, right? We've spoken about that before, so just add that in. Bring that part to the heart, attune and provide what it needs energetically in the moment. Take one healthy action step, that means towards it. Write down one thing that will help you prevent dysregulation next time. So that would just be kind of preventative measures in the future. But I can tell you right now, you're not going to ever forever prevent them. They will keep coming back. I know this because I'm always asking my 70 and 80-year-old mentors, how you guys doing? How's it going? Are they still there? And they still say to me, yeah, it's much less, don't get me wrong, but it seems like they're never fully eradicated. And what we want is we want them to come around at longer and longer and further elliptical orbits. And as an option, some artists really enjoy this, and I enjoyed this myself. But draw your Olympus, draw it. I mean, there aren't an infinite number of subpersonalities that you're exhibiting, right? There's not a multiplicity within you that can't be rendered on paper. Draw a description of it. Many artists have actually done this. They've actually drawn pictures of the different parts of them, and then do the next one. Like, who are they becoming? Do both. Render your unhealthy gang and your hero's fellowship. I hope this was useful. I had a lot of fun today, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace in.